A little beggar girl saved a boy who had fainted on the street without knowing that his millionaire father was watching her. When the millionaire asked what she wanted in return, the girl's answer brought him to tears. The icy wind cut like a razor through the cracks of the cardboard that served as a wall in the small makeshift shelter. Sophia, an 8-year-old girl with disheveled brown hair and clothes that were once blue but now had the indefinite color of accumulated dirt, carefully adjusted the torn blanket over the fragile body of her grandmother Eleanor. The 62-year-old woman coughed forcefully, each spasm making her thin chest rise and fall irregularly. Her wrinkled and trembling hands struggled to hold the cracked plastic mug that Sophia had filled with warm water, obtained from the public tap 3 blocks away. The abandoned alley where they sheltered was between 2 empty commercial buildings, protected only by a precarious structure of old wood and punctured tarps that Sophia had assembled with her own hands over the months. "Grandma, you need to drink more water. It will help with the cough," said Sophia, gently holding the mug to make it easier for Eleanor to drink. "Thank you, my dear. You always take such good care of me," Eleanor replied with a weak voice but full of affection. Sophia's brown eyes shone with a mixture of determination and concern as she watched Eleanor try to swallow small sips of water. Her grandmother had lost a lot of weight in recent weeks. Her yellowish skin stretched over the protruding bones of her face that once was round and smiling. Sophia vaguely remembered when they lived in a real house, with solid walls and a roof that didn't leak, but that seemed a lifetime ago. Her parents, Charles and Mary, had been first responders and died in an accident when she was only 5 years old. Since then, Eleanor had struggled to raise her alone, but illness and debts eventually took everything they had. Now, 3 years later, they survived by collecting recyclable materials during the day and begging for a few coins at traffic lights when Eleanor could get up. "Sophia, come here close to me. I need to tell you something." "What is it, Grandma?" "Are you in pain again?" Eleanor made a weak gesture for Sophia to come closer, her trembling hands caressing her granddaughter's dirty face with infinite tenderness. Her eyes, despite fatigue and illness, still maintained that warm glow that always reassured Sophia in the most difficult moments. The girl snuggled beside her grandmother, feeling the weak heat emanating from the debilitated body, and noticed how Eleanor tried to disguise the pain she felt with each breath. The smell of expired medicines and dampness permeated the small space, but Sophia had already grown accustomed to it. What really worried her was the sound of Eleanor's breathing, increasingly irregular and forced. She had learned from her parents that this type of breathing was not a good sign, and it kept her awake every night, watching her grandmother's every move. "Today is my birthday, dear." "I'm 63 years old," Eleanor revealed with a melancholic smile, caressing her granddaughter's face. "Your birthday? Grandma, why didn't you tell me before?" exclaimed Sophia with eyes wide with surprise and guilt. Sophia's heart raced upon hearing that revelation. How could she forget such an important date? Her eyes filled with tears as she tried to mentally calculate how much time had passed since Eleanor's last birthday, when they still had a house and could buy a small cake at the corner bakery. Guilt weighed on her chest like a stone, making her feel that she had failed as a granddaughter. Eleanor always made a point of celebrating Sophia's birthday with some special treat, even if it was just a flower picked in the square or a sweet obtained through the kindness of some merchant. Now it was Sophia's turn to reciprocate this affection, but she had absolutely nothing to offer. Her small, dirty hands closed into fists, determined to find a way to make that day special for the most important person in her life. "It doesn't matter, my child. A birthday is just a date on the calendar," Eleanor murmured, trying to diminish the importance of the fact so as not to worry Sophia. "That's not true, Grandma. Every birthday is important and deserves to be celebrated," Sophia declared with determination, suddenly standing up. Sophia stood up with a sudden energy, her eyes shining with a determination that Eleanor hadn't seen in weeks. The girl began to walk from side to side in the small space of the makeshift shelter, her hands gesturing while mentally organizing a plan. She remembered how her mother Mary always said that the simplest gestures were the most meaningful, and that love was demonstrated through small acts from the heart. Eleanor watched her granddaughter with a weak smile, recognizing in her the same obstinacy that Charles showed when he decided to help someone in trouble. The elderly woman's breathing was more difficult, but she made a point of disguising it, so as not to worry Sophia even more. Each day that passed, Eleanor felt her strength diminishing, but her granddaughter's presence gave her courage to continue fighting. "I will get flowers for you, Grandma. Fresh and beautiful flowers, not the wilted ones we sometimes find in the trash," Sophia promised with conviction, her eyes shining with determination. "Sophia, dear, You don't need to worry about that. Being here with you is already the best gift, Eleanor responded tenderly, touched by her granddaughter's dedication. But Sophia had already made her decision, and when she set her mind on something, it was impossible to make her change it. She knelt beside Eleanor and held her hands delicately, looking directly into her grandmother's tired eyes. The seriousness on the 8-year-old girl's face was touching, a mixture of childish innocence with the maturity forced by the difficult circumstances they had faced together. Eleanor felt her heart tighten, seeing how her granddaughter had grown up too fast, taking on responsibilities that shouldn't belong to a child. Even so, she felt proud of the brave and determined girl Sophia had become, inheriting the best of the parents who left too early. I solemnly promise that I will bring fresh flowers for you today, even if I have to search the entire city, Sophia swore, holding her grandmother's hands firmly and looking directly into her eyes. My dear Sophia, you have a heart too big for your small body, Eleanor whispered emotionally, feeling her eyes fill with tears. Sophia's words echoed through the small shelter with the force of a sacred oath. Eleanor smiled tenderly, her heavy eyelids beginning to close as fatigue took over her weakened body. The elderly woman tried to protest once more, explaining that Sophia didn't need to go out looking for flowers in the street, but the girl was already mentally organizing her itinerary through the city. She knew every trash can, every public garden, and every flower shop within a 10-block radius. There were places where she sometimes found flowers that were still in reasonable condition, discarded at the end of the day by merchants. Today she would be more persistent, more careful in her search. Eleanor deserved something special, something that demonstrated all the love and gratitude Sophia felt for her. Now rest a bit, Grandma. When you wake up, I'll be here with your birthday flowers, Sophia said affectionately, adjusting the blanket over Eleanor. Be careful out there, my child, and don't stray too far from home, Eleanor asked with concern, even as she felt sleep taking over. Sophia covered Eleanor with extra care, checking that the blanket was well adjusted to protect her from the cold that was beginning to intensify with the approach of afternoon. Her grandmother's breathing gradually became more regular as she fell asleep, and Sophia took advantage of this moment of tranquility to organize her thoughts. She knew exactly where to begin her search. The flower shop on the main street always discarded flowers at the end of the day, and if she arrived at the right time, she could find some that were still fresh. After that, she would check the public gardens for wildflowers she could pick without damaging the plants. Her determination was unshakable, fueled by the unconditional love she felt for the grandmother who had sacrificed everything for her. Sophia left the shelter silently, stepping carefully not to make noise and wake Eleanor. The sun was already beginning to tilt on the horizon, tinting the sky with orange hues that contrasted with the gray of the surrounding buildings. The girl walked through the narrow streets with determined steps, ignoring the curious and sometimes compassionate looks from passers-by. She had learned not to care about these looks, always focusing on her objectives and the need to take care of Eleanor. Her small hands checked the empty pockets of her torn pants, confirming she had no coins to buy flowers, but this did not discourage her determination. She knew the streets like the back of her hand, and knew where to find treasures discarded by others. Today will be different. Today I'll find something special for Grandma, Sophia murmured to herself, walking with determined steps. She deserves to have a happy birthday, even living on the street, she thought determinedly, ignoring the curious glances of passers-by. Sophia's first stop was the dumpster behind the most famous flower shop in the area. She had observed the employees' schedules for weeks and knew they usually discarded flowers at the end of the afternoon. With her heart beating hard with expectation, she approached the large waste container, climbing on an old box to better reach the interior. Her small hands carefully rummaged through the plastic bags, looking for any sign of color that might indicate the presence of flowers. The strong smell of garbage made her wrinkle her nose, but she continued searching with determination. Unfortunately, she found only empty packages and dry leaves. The employees had probably been more careful with disposal that day, not leaving anything usable behind. I can't give up now. Grandma is counting on me, Sophia murmured, wiping her dirty hands on her clothes and moving away from the empty trash can. There must be a place where I can find beautiful flowers for her, she thought hopefully, heading to the next location on her list. Determined not to return empty-handed, Sophia proceeded to the second location on her list, a small public garden 3 blocks ahead. The place was well maintained by the city, with colorful flower beds and a fountain in the center that attracted many families during weekends. Sophia knew she couldn't simply pick flowers from the beds, as that would be wrong and could damage the beauty of the place for other people. Instead, she looked for flowers that might have fallen naturally, or that were in areas where harvesting wouldn't cause visible damage. She walked carefully around each flower bed, examining the ground for fresh petals or small flowers that might have detached from the main plants. "I need to find something perfect. Grandma has always done her best for me," Sophia murmured, carefully examining each flower bed for fallen flowers. "I can't disappoint her on her birthday," she thought with determination, continuing her meticulous search. After an hour of meticulous searching in the garden, Sophia managed to gather only a few loose petals and 2 small wildflowers that grew in a less maintained area. Although they were beautiful, she knew it wasn't enough to make a bouquet worthy of Eleanor's birthday. Frustration began to grow in her chest, but she took a deep breath and remembered her parents' teachings about perseverance. Charles always said that the best first responders were those who never gave up, even when the situation seemed impossible. Mary added that true love always finds a way, no matter how difficult the obstacle. Inspired by these memories, Sophia decided to expand her search area, going to more distant locations where she might have better luck. Dad and Mom never gave up on helping people. "I can't give up on Grandma," Sophia reflected, remembering the teachings of her deceased parents. "There must be a place where I can find fresh and beautiful flowers," she thought with renewed hope, deciding to expand her search area. The third location on Sophia's list was a busy commercial area where several stores had small decorative gardens in front. She walked slowly along the sidewalk, carefully observing each establishment, looking for flowers that might have fallen or been discarded. At one of the stores, she noticed a small bed with red roses, some of which had petals fallen on the ground around them. Sophia approached carefully, making sure no one was watching, and began to delicately collect the petals that had fallen naturally. It was meticulous work, as she wanted only petals that were in good condition, without stains or signs of deterioration. Each collected petal represented a small piece of hope that she would be able to assemble something beautiful for Eleanor. "These petals still smell nice. Grandma will like them," Sophia murmured contentedly, delicately collecting each fallen petal. "I need to gather a few more to make a small but beautiful bouquet," she thought concentratedly, carefully checking the condition of each petal found. When Sophia was about to stand up, satisfied with the collected petals, she spotted something that made her heart race with joy. Across the street, near a trash can, was a small bouquet of flowers that seemed to have been discarded recently. The flowers still maintained their vibrant colors, although some were slightly wilted. To Sophia, those flowers represented the answer to her prayers, the perfect solution for Eleanor's birthday present. She ran across the street, her heart beating hard with expectation, imagining the smile that would light up her grandmother's face when she saw those beautiful flowers. Finally, after hours of searching, she had found something worthy of the love she felt for Eleanor. "What beautiful flowers! Grandma will be so happy when she sees this," Sophia exclaimed quietly, her eyes shining with joy as she spotted the bouquet. "I finally managed to find something special for her birthday," she thought emotionally, running toward the flowers with her heart racing. Sophia approached the bouquet carefully, her small hands trembling with emotion as she gently touched the still fresh petals. The flowers were a mixture of white daisies and pink roses, tied with a ribbon that still maintained its original color. Although some petals were slightly crumpled, and there were signs that they had been discarded a few hours ago, to Sophia those flowers were perfect. She picked them up carefully, checking if there was any damage that could be fixed, and began rearranging the bouquet to make it even more beautiful. Her mind was already imagining Eleanor receiving those flowers, her eyes shining with happiness on her birthday. Finally, Sophia had managed to find something worthy of the love she felt for her grandmother. "Get out of there immediately." "You can't go through my trash," shouted the furious man, walking towards Sophia with threatening steps. "Drop those flowers right now, you dirty brat," he vociferated with anger, gesturing aggressively with his large hands. The deep and irritated voice cut through the air like lightning, making Sophia jump with fright, and quickly turned to find the source of the shout. A tall, stocky man wearing a dirty apron and with a face red with anger was walking towards her with wide and threatening steps. His small, aggressive eyes were fixed on Sophia with an expression of disgust and indignation that made the girl instinctively back away. The man gestured with his large, calloused hands, accusingly pointing at the bouquet that Sophia held with such care. The girl felt her heart sink in her chest, immediately understanding that those flowers she had found belonged to the man's commercial establishment. Her joy instantly turned into fear and shame, but she still pressed the flowers against her chest, reluctant to give up the perfect gift for Eleanor. "Please, sir, I just wanted these flowers for my grandmother's birthday." Sophia pleaded with a trembling voice, clutching the flowers to her chest. She is very sick and today is a special day for her, she explained with tears in her eyes, trying to awaken the man's compassion. The man showed no compassion for Sophia's words. On the contrary, his expression became even more severe and threatening. He moved closer to the girl, his shadow completely covering Sophia's small body, who began to tremble not only from fear but also from disappointment. The man extended his large hand toward the flowers, his thick fingers preparing to snatch the bouquet from the girl's delicate hands. Sophia could smell the strong odor of sweat and cigarettes emanating from the man, and her eyes filled with tears as she realized she would lose the perfect gift she had found for Eleanor. The injustice of the situation weighed on her heart like a stone, for she had done nothing wrong besides wanting to show love for her grandmother on her birthday. "I don't care who those flowers were for. This is private property," yelled the man without showing any compassion. "Children like you shouldn't be rummaging through other people's trash," he continued shouting, extending his hand to snatch the flowers from Sophia. The man, irritated, gestured abruptly, causing Sophia to back away and trip, falling on the sidewalk. She got up quickly, but the emotional pain was intense as she watched the flowers scatter on the ground. The delicate petals she had touched with such care were now spread across the dirt of the street, while the man continued shouting at her. Sophia quickly tried to gather the scattered flowers, her small and now hurt hands moving desperately to save what remained of the bouquet. Thick tears began to roll down her dirty cheeks, mixing with the dust from the sidewalk as she struggled to recover Eleanor's gift. "Grandma, I'm sorry. I tried, but I couldn't," Sophia sobbed, looking at the destroyed flowers scattered on the ground. "How will I go home with nothing to give her on her birthday?" she asked herself desperately, trying to gather the pieces of the shattered bouquet. The man continued shouting and gesturing aggressively, while Sophia cried on the ground, desperately trying to save the damaged flowers. Some people passing by on the street stopped to observe the scene, but no one offered to help the girl or reprimand the man for his cruel attitude. Sophia felt ashamed not only for being publicly humiliated, but also for having failed in her mission to get a worthy gift for Eleanor. The flowers that seemed perfect a few minutes before were now unrecognizable, their bruised and dirty petals mixed with dry leaves and street trash. The girl finally gave up trying to save the bouquet, her empty hands trembling as she slowly rose from the ground, feeling the weight of defeat in every muscle of her small body. "Never let me see you touching my things again," the man threatened, pointing his finger accusingly at Sophia. "Get out of here before I call the police," he shouted with disdain, watching the girl walk away crying. Sophia moved away from the man with stumbling steps, her tears falling freely as she walked back toward the alley where Eleanor was waiting. Her injured knees burned with each step, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the emptiness she felt in her heart for returning empty-handed on her grandmother's birthday. The sun was already setting, tinting the sky with reddish hues that cruelly contrasted with the sadness dominating her thoughts. She had solemnly promised that she would bring fresh flowers to Eleanor, and now she would have to face her grandmother, knowing she had failed. The weight of this disappointment was almost unbearable for an 8-year-old child who had placed all her hope and determination in that simple but meaningful mission. "How will I explain to Grandma that I couldn't keep my promise?" Sophia lamented, walking slowly back home with a broken heart. She'll be sad knowing her birthday went unmarked once again, she thought anxiously, feeling the weight of disappointment in each step she took. Sophia walked through the streets with slow, discouraged steps. Her tears had already dried, but left visible marks on her dirty cheeks. Her knees still burned from the injuries caused by the fall, and her small hands trembled, not only from the cold of the approaching evening, but from the shame and frustration she carried in her chest. With each step she took toward the public park, which was on her way back home, she felt the weight of the broken promise like a stone in her stomach. The cruel man's words echoed in her mind, mixing with the image of destroyed flowers scattered across the dirty sidewalk. How would she explain to Eleanor that she had failed? How would she look into her grandmother's tired eyes and say she couldn't fulfill the only thing she had promised to do on her birthday? The park appeared before her like an oasis of green, amid the grey concrete of the city, but not even the beauty of the trees could ease the pain she felt in her broken heart. "How will I face Grandma after everything that happened?" she muttered to herself, wiping her nose with the sleeve of her dirty blouse. "She'll know I failed just by looking at my face," she thought sadly, feeling new tears threatening to emerge. Upon entering the park, Sophia immediately noticed the difference between that tranquil environment and the busy streets she had passed through in the last few hours. Families walked along the paved paths, Children ran among the colorful playground equipment, and elderly couples fed pigeons on benches shaded by leafy trees. It was a completely different world from hers, a place where people had time for leisure and didn't need to worry about finding food or a safe place to sleep. Sophia felt even more out of place there, with her torn and dirty clothes contrasting with the clean and colorful attire of the other children. Even so, she continued walking through the park, enjoying those moments of peace, before having to face the painful reality that awaited her in the alley where Eleanor was waiting for her return. The sound of children's laughter and the singing of birds created a melancholic soundtrack for her confused thoughts, where guilt over failure mixed with longing for the times when she too could play carelessly. "At least here nobody will kick me out for being dirty and ragged," Sophia murmured, watching the other children play freely. "I wish I could go back in time and warn Grandma that today wasn't a good day to make promises." She sighed melancholically, sitting down on an empty bench. It was then that her tired eyes spotted a scene that made her slowly rise from the bench where she had settled. On the other side of the playground, near the colorful swings, a boy approximately her age played alone with a toy car, making it run through the sand tracks while imitating engine sounds with his mouth. The boy had dark, straight hair, wore clean and new clothes, and seemed completely absorbed in his solitary play. A few meters away, a tall, well-dressed man wearing a dark suit and tie walked back and forth while talking on the phone with nervous gestures and a raised voice. Sophia could hear fragments of the conversation, words like contracts, millions, and urgent, indicating it was about important business matters. The man seemed completely oblivious to the boy's presence, too focused on his call to pay attention to his son playing alone. There was something in the scene that touched Sophia's heart, perhaps the memory of when her own parents were alive and always made time to play with her, regardless of how busy they were with work at the emergency service. "That boy looks as lonely as I feel right now," Sophia observed, slowly approaching the play area. "At least he has a father nearby, even if he's busy," she thought with a pang of longing for her own parents. Sophia moved closer to the playground, maintaining a respectful distance, but observing with curiosity the games of the boy who had caught her attention. The boy, whom she didn't yet know was called Dylan, had agile and precise movements as he maneuvered the red toy car along the improvised tracks he had created in the sand. Occasionally, he would stop to eat small pieces of a colorful candy that he took from a plastic bag, chewing with pleasure while continuing his play. Michael, the boy's father, continued his heated telephone conversation, walking in circles and gesticulating with his free hand, completely absorbed in the business problems he was discussing with someone on the other end of the line. Sophia could tell from the man's body language that it was something very important and urgent, the kind of situation her parents used to face when they received emergency calls in the middle of the night. The difference was that Charles and Mary always managed to balance work with the attention they gave her, something that apparently didn't happen in that family. Observing that family dynamic awakened in Sophia contradictory feelings of compassion for the lonely boy and envy for the privileged material conditions he obviously possessed. "It must be nice to have so many new toys to play with," Sophia murmured, remembering the few toys she had lost when they were evicted. "But it can't be fun to always play alone, with no one to share the fun with," she reflected with wisdom beyond her 8 years. Time passed slowly as Sophia observed the family scene from a distance, lost in her own thoughts about the social differences that separated people. The boy continued playing with dedication, occasionally looking in his father's direction, hoping to get his attention, but Michael remained focused on his endless call. The sun was beginning to tilt on the horizon, painting the sky with golden hues that announced the end of the afternoon, and Sophia knew she would need to return soon to Eleanor, even empty-handed. It was in this moment of melancholy contemplation that something unexpected happened, something that would completely change the course of that day which had begun with so much hope and transformed into disappointment. Dylan, still focused on his play, put a larger piece of candy in his mouth, chewing quickly while trying to make the car climb a small sand ramp he had built. The abrupt movement and haste caused the candy to slip down his throat the wrong way, suddenly and terrifyingly blocking his breathing. The boy's smile instantly transformed into an expression of panic and despair. "The boy is choking," shouted Sophia, rising from the bench in an automatic impulse. "I need to do something before it's too late," she thought desperately, running toward the playground. What happened in the following seconds seemed to unfold in slow motion for Sophia, each detail etching itself in her memory with crystalline clarity. Dylan dropped the red car in the sand and brought both hands to his throat, his eyes widening in terror as he desperately tried to swallow or expel the piece of candy blocking his breathing. His face, previously rosy and healthy, began to take on an alarming purplish coloration, a sign that oxygen wasn't reaching his lungs. The boy staggered a few steps, trying to get his father's attention, but no sound came from his obstructed throat. Michael, still with his back turned and completely absorbed in his telephone conversation, didn't notice the drama unfolding just a few meters away. Dylan fell to his knees in the sand, his small hands beating on his own chest, in an instinctive and desperate attempt to clear the air passage. Sophia felt her heart race as she recognized the classic signs of asphyxiation that her parents had taught her during the many conversations about first aid they had at home. There was no time to lose. Every second was crucial, and she was the only person present who knew exactly what to do in that life-or-death situation. "Help! The boy is choking and can't breathe," Sophia shouted with all the strength of her lungs, running toward Dylan. "I have to apply the maneuver that Dad and Mum taught me," she thought determinedly, remembering the lessons she had received years ago. Michael finally turned around upon hearing Sophia's desperate screams, the phone escaping from his hands and falling onto the grass as he ran toward his son, who was struggling on the sand. The man arrived first, but his expression of absolute panic revealed that he had no idea what to do in that critical situation. His hands trembled uncontrollably as he knelt beside Dylan, shouting his son's name repeatedly without being able to offer any practical help. The boy's face was turning increasingly purple, his movements becoming weaker and uncoordinated, signs that time was running out quickly. Michael looked around desperately, searching for someone who could help, his voice hoarse from shouting for help echoing through the park. That's when Sophia came running, her first aid knowledge automatically activating as she quickly assessed the situation. Without hesitation, she positioned herself behind Dylan, applying the technique that Charles and Mary had taught her with such patience and care. Her small but firm and precise hands found the exact point below the boy's sternum, applying the necessary pressure in quick and efficient movements. "Please, God, let me remember everything my parents taught me correctly," Sophia murmured while performing the Heimlich maneuver. "He needs to live. He's too young to die like this," she thought concentratedly, maintaining the calm she had learned by observing her parents in emergency situations. The technique worked almost immediately, the piece of candy flying from Dylan's mouth and landing on the sand a few meters away. The boy took a deep, desperate breath, his chest rising and falling rapidly as oxygen began to circulate through his lungs again. The purple color of his face gradually gave way to the normal pinkish tone, and tears of relief began to stream down his cheeks as he recovered from the shock. Michael threw himself over his son, hugging him tightly while tears of gratitude ran down his face, his hands trembling with emotion as he felt the boy's regular breathing against his chest. Sophia stepped back a few paces, allowing father and son to experience that moment of reunion, but Michael gently held her by the arm, his eyes shining with a mixture of relief, gratitude, and admiration for the courage and competence of the girl who had saved his son's life. The park, which seconds before was immersed in cries of despair, now filled with Michael's caring whispers trying to calm Dylan and words of thanks directed at Sophia. Other people in the park had approached, forming a small respectful circle around the family, but no one dared to interrupt that intimate and emotional moment. "God, how did you know what to do? You saved my son's life," Michael exclaimed, still trembling with emotion. "I will never be able to thank you enough for what you did today," he said with a choked voice, looking at Sophia with deep admiration. Sophia felt a confused mixture of emotions running through her small, tired body. On one hand, she felt proud for having correctly applied her parents' teachings and saved a life, something they would certainly be proud of if they were alive to witness that moment. On the other hand, the memory of the humiliation suffered shortly before was still fresh in her memory, making her hesitate about how to respond to Michael's kind words. She observed the well-dressed and obviously wealthy man, noting how he treated her with respect and consideration, something completely different from the cruelty she had faced on the streets during her search for Eleanor's flowers. Dylan, still a bit shaken by the scare, looked at her with curiosity and gratitude, his eyes shining with an innocence that Sophia recognized in herself before life on the streets hardened her experiences. The social difference between them was obvious, but at that specific moment, united by the shared experience of life and death, these differences seemed less important. Sophia could feel that Michael was genuinely grateful and wanted to repay in some way the favor she had done for his family. "My parents were first responders, sir. They taught me these techniques when I was even younger," Sophia explained timidly, wiping her dirty hands on her clothes. "They always said we never know when we'll need to help someone in an emergency," she added in a low voice, remembering the wise words of Charles and Mary. Michael rose slowly, still keeping Dylan close to him, and extended his hand to Sophia in a gesture of deep respect and gratitude. When she hesitated to accept the greeting, he truly noticed for the first time the conditions in which the girl found herself: the worn and dirty clothes, the bruises on her knees, the disheveled hair, and the expression of someone who had gone through difficult experiences that day. His expression changed from simple gratitude to genuine concern for the well-being of the girl who had saved his son. Michael was an experienced businessman, accustomed to quickly assessing situations and making important decisions, and at that moment he could clearly see that Sophia needed help just as much as Dylan had needed moments before. The difference was that his son's problem had been resolved in seconds, but Sophia's situation seemed to be something much more complex and enduring. He knew he had a debt of gratitude that could never be fully repaid, but he was determined to try to reciprocate in some meaningful way what she had done for his family. "How can I repay what you've done for us? Tell me anything you want or need," Michael sincerely offered, placing his hand on Sophia's shoulder. "No matter what it is, I will provide it. You saved what is most precious to me," he insisted with emotion, looking alternately at Sophia and Dylan. Michael's question hit Sophia like lightning, bringing back all the pain and frustration she had felt throughout the day. Her small hands closed instinctively, remembering the destroyed flowers, the humiliation suffered, and the broken promise that weighed on her heart like a stone. She could ask for anything from an obviously rich and generous man, but all her heart desired was something simple and pure: fresh flowers for her sick grandmother's birthday. However, the traumatic experience with the cruel merchant had left deep marks on her confidence, making her hesitate about whether to trust an adult again, even one who seemed genuinely kind. She looked at Michael with her large, expressive eyes, evaluating the sincerity in his words and gestures. The man waited patiently, realizing that the girl was internally struggling with some important decision. Dylan, still recovering from the scare, observed the conversation with curiosity, truly noticing for the first time Sophia's appearance and beginning to understand that she lived in conditions very different from his own. The afternoon was advancing, and Sophia knew that Eleanor would be waiting for her return, probably worried about her delay. "I just wanted flowers for my grandmother, sir. Today is her birthday," Sophia whispered, her voice almost inaudible with emotion. "I tried all day to find beautiful flowers, but I couldn't," she confessed, ashamed, lowering her eyes to avoid Michael's compassionate gaze. Michael's heart tightened upon hearing Sophia's simple and touching response. He had expected her to ask for money, clothes, food, or any of the obvious necessities that her appearance suggested, but she had asked only for flowers to celebrate her grandmother's birthday. The purity and selflessness of that request moved him deeply, making him realize that he was before a special child, with solid values and a generous heart that had remained intact, despite the difficulties she obviously faced. He knelt in front of Sophia to be at eye level with her, wanting to convey the seriousness and sincerity of his next words. Dylan moved closer to the two, sensing that something important was happening in that conversation. Michael quickly thought of the best florists in the city, places where he could buy the most beautiful and expensive arrangements available, worthy of the gratitude he felt for the brave girl who had saved his son. In his mind, he was already planning how to transform that simple request into something truly special and memorable for Sophia and her grandmother. "Flowers, is that all you want?" Michael asked, surprised and touched by the simplicity of the request. "I will buy the most beautiful flowers in the entire city for your grandmother. The best that money can buy," he promised with enthusiasm, already imagining the luxurious arrangements he could provide. But Michael's enthusiastic words were interrupted by an expression of panic that suddenly took over Sophia's face. Reality hit the girl like a punch to the stomach. While she was there in the park, Eleanor remained alone in the cold, damp alley, sick and fragile, waiting for her return. Hours had passed since she had left in search of flowers, and her grandmother's health condition was becoming increasingly delicate. What if something had happened to Eleanor during her absence? What if her persistent cough had worsened? What if the high fever she had been running for the past few days had dangerously increased? Sophia felt her legs grow weak as she thought of all the terrible possibilities that could have occurred while she was distracted observing the privileged lives of other people in the park. Time had become her enemy, and every minute she spent away from Eleanor increased her anxiety and guilt. She needed to return immediately, But she also couldn't simply run off after Michael had offered to help. The situation became even more complex when she realized she would have to explain to that kind man the cruel reality of her life on the streets. "My grandmother is very ill, sir. She may not be alive anymore when I return," Sophia revealed with a trembling voice, her words coming out as a whisper laden with fear and desperation. "I need to run home right now. I've been away for too long," she added urgently, her eyes filling with tears of panic. Sophia's words hit Michael like lightning, making him instantly understand the gravity of the situation unfolding before his eyes. The panic in the girl's voice was genuine and desperate, revealing a deep fear that went far beyond a child's normal concern for a sick relative. Michael saw in her eyes the same urgency he had felt moments before when Dylan was choking, the terrifying sensation that each lost second could be fatal. Without hesitation, he quickly stood up and extended his hand to Sophia, his business mind already organizing an efficient action plan to face that emergency. Dylan, still a bit shaken by his own scare, observed the scene with growing curiosity, realizing that something very serious was happening. Michael picked up his phone from the ground where it had fallen during the previous panic and quickly checked if it hadn't been damaged, knowing he might need to make important calls in the next few minutes. The determination that always guided him in the most complex business dealings was now directed toward helping that brave girl who had saved his son's life. He would not allow Sophia to face that desperate situation alone, not after everything she had done for his family. "We won't waste any more time here. Take me to your grandmother right now," Michael ordered firmly, already heading toward the park's parking lot. "You won't face this alone. I have resources and I'll use all of them to help," he declared with conviction, holding Sophia's hand to convey reassurance. Michael called Dylan to his side and quickly explained that they needed to accompany Sophia to her home because her grandmother was very ill and needed urgent help. The boy, still impacted by the near-death experience he had lived through, nodded with a seriousness beyond his 8 years, instinctively understanding the gravity of the situation. The three ran toward the parking lot where Michael had left his car, a luxurious black sedan that drastically contrasted with the simple environment of the public park. Sophia hesitated for a moment upon seeing the expensive vehicle, again reminded of the social differences that separated them, but the urgency of the situation overcame any embarrassment she might feel. Michael quickly opened the doors and helped the children get in, adjusting the seatbelts with precise and efficient movements. While starting the engine, he asked Sophia to give directions to reach the place where she and Eleanor lived, mentally preparing himself for what he might find ahead. The car's engine purred smoothly as they left the parking lot, leaving behind the park's tranquil environment and heading toward a much harsher and more challenging reality. "Where do I need to go?" "Tell me the quickest way possible," Michael asked, already accelerating through the streets toward the city center. "Don't worry about anything else now. We'll get there in time and your grandmother will be fine," he assured with confidence, trying to convey optimism to calm Sophia. During the journey through the increasingly busy streets, Sophia directed Michael with nervous instructions, her small hands trembling as she pointed out the directions they should follow. The contrast between neighborhoods became more evident with each block they traveled, the wide, tree-lined streets giving way to narrow, neglected alleys, the well-maintained residential buildings being replaced by old and deteriorated constructions. Michael observed everything with growing attention, beginning to truly understand the conditions in which Sophia and her grandmother lived. Dylan was also looking out the window with curiosity, never having seen up close the reality of urban poverty that existed so close to his privileged world. The car slowed down as they entered narrower streets, where asphalt gave way to irregular cobblestones and sidewalks became practically non-existent. Sophia felt her heart racing with each turn they made, anxious to quickly reach the alley where Eleanor was waiting. With each passing minute, her imagination created increasingly terrifying scenarios about her grandmother's health condition, feeding her fears and increasing her desperation. "It's up ahead, Mr. Michael. That alley between the two abandoned buildings," Sophia indicated with a trembling voice, pointing to a narrow passage that was barely visible. "Please, let Grandma be okay. Please, don't let me be too late," she murmured like a desperate prayer, closing her eyes tightly. Michael parked the car on the main street as close as possible to the entrance of the alley, and the three quickly got out of the vehicle. Sophia ran ahead, her footsteps echoing off the narrow walls of the corridor formed by the abandoned buildings, followed closely by Michael and Dylan, who tried to keep up with her desperate pace. The smell of dampness and accumulated garbage grew stronger as they approached the place where Sophia and Eleanor had built their improvised shelter. Michael could now see the precarious conditions in which the two lived. Walls made of cardboard and old wood, an improvised roof with punctured tarps that barely protected from the rain, and a packed dirt floor covered with worn rugs. Dylan held his father's hand tightly, impressed and a little frightened by this environment so different from everything he knew. Sophia's heart was beating so hard that she could hear the sound in her ears as she approached the entrance of the small shelter. Her hands trembled as she pushed aside the old curtain that served as a door, preparing herself to face what she might find on the other side. "Grandma! Grandma Eleanor! I'm back and I've brought help!" Sophia shouted as she entered the shelter, her voice echoing in the small, stuffy space. "Please answer. I need to know you're okay," she begged desperately, searching for the familiar figure in the shadowy interior. What Sophia found upon entering the shelter made her world completely fall apart. Eleanor was lying in the same place where she had been left hours before, but her position had changed dramatically. The elderly woman was unconscious, her fragile body curved in an uncomfortable position, as if she had lost consciousness while trying to get up. Her breathing was so weak and irregular that Sophia had to get very close to make sure she was still alive. Eleanor's face was pale and sweaty, her lips slightly bluish, indicating severe respiratory difficulty. The fever that had been manifesting itself over the last few days had obviously worsened, leaving her in a critical state that required immediate medical attention. Sophia threw herself beside her grandmother, her small hands gently touching Eleanor's burning face, while desperate tears streamed down her cheeks. Michael and Dylan entered right behind, both shocked by the conditions of the shelter and the apparently serious state of the elderly woman. Michael immediately realized that this was a serious medical emergency, his experience in crisis situations alerting him to the urgency of the situation. "Grandma, please wake up. I brought good people to help us," Sophia sobbed, gently shaking Eleanor's body. "Don't leave me alone now. You promised we would always stay together," she cried desperately, feeling guilty for having taken so long to return. Michael knelt beside Sophia and Eleanor, quickly checking the elderly woman's vital signs with the basic knowledge he possessed. Eleanor's pulse was weak and rapid, her breathing shallow and labored, and her body temperature indicated a high fever that could be dangerous if not treated immediately. He looked at Sophia with a serious but determined expression, conveying the confidence of someone accustomed to making important decisions under pressure. Without hesitation, Michael took off his expensive coat and spread it on the ground next to Eleanor, preparing to carry her to the car as carefully as possible. Dylan watched everything with wide eyes, never having witnessed such a dramatic and real situation. The urgency of the situation did not allow for long explanations or elaborate preparations. Every second was crucial to ensure that Eleanor received the medical treatment she obviously needed. Michael knew that his words needed to convey security and determination to calm Sophia and motivate her to collaborate in her grandmother's rescue. "Sophia, your grandmother needs a hospital right now. I'll carry her to my car and take you to the best hospital in the city," Michael explained with calm authority, already positioning his arms to lift Eleanor. "You were brave to save my son. Now I'll be brave to save your grandmother," he promised with conviction, looking directly into Sophia's eyes to convey confidence. With careful and precise movements, Michael slid his arms under Eleanor's fragile body, lifting her with the delicacy of someone carrying something extremely precious and fragile. The elderly woman did not react to the movement, remaining unconscious in the arms of the man who moments before was a complete stranger. Sophia walked beside Michael during the entire journey back to the car, her small hands constantly touching Eleanor's arm or hand, whispering words of encouragement that she hoped her grandmother could hear even while unconscious. Dylan followed behind, carrying his father's coat and observing with fascination the demonstration of courage and solidarity he was witnessing. The journey through the narrow alley was made in respectful silence, only the sound of footsteps echoing off the damp walls and Sophia's occasional whisper trying to keep Eleanor connected to the conscious world. When they reached the car, Michael carefully opened the back door and settled Eleanor on the seat, while Sophia entered from the other side to stay next to her grandmother throughout the journey to the hospital. The situation had completely transformed from the relaxed moment in the park. Now it was a race against time to save a life. "She's breathing, but very weakly. She needs oxygen and urgent medication," Michael observed, adjusting Eleanor as comfortably as possible on the seat. "We're going to St. Luke's Hospital. There's the best in the area, and only 10 minutes from here," he informed efficiently, already starting the engine and leaving at a controlled speed. During the journey to the hospital, Sophia didn't stop talking to Eleanor, telling her about everything that had happened during the day, from the frustrated search for flowers to meeting Michael and Dylan in the park. She held her grandmother's cold and trembling hand, constantly checking her breathing and trying to keep the connection between them alive through loving words and shared memories. Michael drove skillfully, navigating through the city traffic with controlled urgency, occasionally looking in the rearview mirror to check Eleanor's condition and reassure Sophia with encouraging words. Dylan, seated in the front, constantly turned to observe the touching scene unfolding behind him, his young mind processing the reality of poverty and illness he had never personally faced. The hospital appeared on the horizon like a beacon of hope, its white walls and red cross promising the medical treatment that Eleanor desperately needed. Sophia felt a mixture of relief and anxiety seeing the building approach, knowing they would finally have access to the resources necessary to save her grandmother, but also fearing what the doctors might discover about Eleanor's health condition. "Grandma, we're arriving at the hospital. The doctors will take care of you and make everything okay," Sophia whispered in Eleanor's ear, squeezing her hand affectionately. "I should have returned earlier. Forgive your granddaughter for taking so long," she murmured guiltily, feeling tears silently streaming down her cheeks. Michael parked the car in the emergency space in front of the emergency room of St. Luke's Hospital, a private establishment known for its modern equipment and quality care. He quickly got out and ran to the other side of the vehicle to help Sophia get out and then carry Eleanor again in his arms. The movement caught the attention of some people passing by the hospital entrance, but Michael was too focused on the urgency of the situation to worry about curious looks. Sophia walked beside him, her worn clothes dramatically contrasting with the clean and modern hospital environment. Dylan followed right behind, observing with growing interest the efficiency of hospital procedures unfolding around them. The automatic doors opened with an electronic whisper, revealing a spacious and well-lit lobby with shiny floors and walls decorated with calming paintings. The characteristic hospital smell, a mixture of disinfectant and medications, filled their nostrils as they quickly headed to the emergency reception desk. Michael approached the desk with Eleanor still in his arms, preparing to explain the situation and request immediate attention. "I need urgent medical attention for this lady. She's unconscious and having difficulty breathing," Michael announced to the reception staff, his voice carrying authority and urgency. "Please call a doctor immediately. Every second counts," he insisted, positioning himself so the employee could clearly see Eleanor's critical condition. However, the reception clerk's reaction was completely unexpected and shocking. The man, who wore a white coat with a badge identifying him as Dr. Robert, looked up from his papers and quickly examined the group approaching his counter. His gaze first lingered on Eleanor, noting her old and dirty clothes, then on Sophia, observing her disheveled and obviously destitute appearance, and finally on Michael, trying to understand the connection between a well-dressed man and these two clearly homeless people. The doctor's expression instantly changed, from professional neutrality to calculated coldness, his lips curving into a thin line of disapproval. He slowly rose from his chair, creating a physical barrier between the group and access to the medical care Eleanor needed. Sophia immediately noticed the change in atmosphere, recognizing in Dr. Robert's eyes the same kind of prejudice and cruelty she had faced throughout that difficult day. Her heart sank upon realizing that even here, in a place that should be dedicated to saving lives regardless of anything, they would still face discrimination and rejection. "We don't treat that kind of people here. This is a private hospital for patients with insurance or the ability to pay," Dr. Robert declared coldly, crossing his arms in a defensive posture. "You need to take her to the public hospital on the other side of town. They handle charity cases there," he informed with disdain, vaguely gesturing toward the exit. The doctor's statement hit the group like a collective slap, leaving Michael temporarily speechless due to indignation and shock. Sophia felt her legs weaken, the hope that had grown during the trip to the hospital instantly transforming into renewed despair. She looked at Eleanor in Michael's arms, noticing that her grandmother's breathing was becoming even weaker during the precious minutes being lost in this absurd discussion. Michael quickly composed himself, his experience in difficult negotiations activating to face this unacceptable situation. He moved closer to Dr. Robert, his eyes shining with the determination he usually used to close the most important contracts of his business career. Dylan remained beside Sophia, instinctively offering silent support while watching the tension grow between the adults. The hospital environment, which moments before had seemed a promise of salvation, had now transformed into yet another obstacle to overcome in the struggle to save Eleanor's life. Michael knew he needed to act quickly, and with authority to break that discriminatory barrier and ensure the care that Eleanor deserved as a human being. "Doctor, this lady is in critical condition and needs immediate attention. I take full financial responsibility for her treatment," Michael argued firmly, maintaining his professional posture despite his indignation. "I'm a well-known businessman in this city and guarantee that all costs will be paid in full," he added with authority, trying to use his social position to break the doctor's resistance. But Dr. Robert remained unyielding in his discriminatory position, shaking his head negatively and keeping his arms crossed in a posture that made clear his refusal to reconsider the decision. He pointed again to the hospital exit, repeating his instructions to seek care in the public health system. Michael felt anger growing in his chest, not just for the injustice of the situation, but also for every precious second being lost while Eleanor remained unconscious in his arms. Sophia began to cry more intensely, realizing that once again they were being rejected and humiliated because of their social condition. Eleanor's breathing became more irregular, her lips acquiring an even more pronounced bluish coloration, indicating severe oxygen deprivation. Time was running out quickly, and Michael knew he needed to make a drastic decision to save the life of the woman he was carrying. Dylan watched everything with wide eyes, witnessing for the first time the cruel reality of social discrimination that existed in his own city. The situation had become a race against time, where each second of delay could mean the difference between life and death for Eleanor. This hospital has the legal obligation to provide emergency care regardless of the patient's social condition. Michael protested, raising his voice with controlled indignation. "You are violating your medical oath and may be criminally liable for failure to provide assistance." He threatened with knowledge of the laws, trying to force a change in position. Michael's legal threat echoed through the hospital lobby, drawing the attention of other staff and patients, who began to discreetly approach to observe the confrontation unfolding. Dr. Robert, however, remained impassive in the face of the businessman's firm words, his cold eyes showing that he would not be easily intimidated by threats or legal arguments. Michael felt the urgency growing in his chest as Eleanor remained unconscious in his arms, her breathing becoming increasingly weak and irregular. Sophia watched the clash with tears in her eyes, feeling powerless in the face of a situation that seemed to escape any control. With each passing second, she could see her grandmother's life slowly slipping away, and the hospital's cruel bureaucracy was transforming into an apparently insurmountable barrier between Eleanor and the treatment that could save her. Michael realized he needed to quickly change strategy, abandoning legal arguments and moving to a more direct and forceful approach. His experience in complex business negotiations had taught him that sometimes it was necessary to use all available resources to achieve a crucial objective. "Dr. Robert, I didn't come here to make empty threats or waste time with sterile discussions," Michael declared with a controlled voice but loaded with authority. "I am Michael Johnson, Chief Executive Officer of Johnson Corporations, and I demand to speak with the General Director of this hospital immediately," he announced, strategically revealing his identity and social position. The name Michael Johnson caused a visible impact not only on Dr. Robert, but also on the other staff who had approached to follow the discussion. Johnson Corporations was one of the largest civil construction companies in the region, responsible for several important developments in the city, including some expansions of the very hospital where they were. Michael noticed the subtle change in the doctor's expression and knew he had found the right leverage to force a reconsideration of the situation. He adjusted Eleanor in his arms, positioning himself so that his body posture conveyed even more authority and determination. Sophia watched fascinated as Michael used his power and influence to fight for them, something she had never witnessed before in her life, marked by social invisibility. Dylan remained by Sophia's side, beginning to understand for the first time how money and social status could be used as tools to break barriers and obtain differential treatment. The hospital environment, which moments before had seemed hostile and exclusionary, was beginning to show signs that it could become more receptive under the pressure exerted by Michael. "You built the north wing of this hospital and donated medical equipment worth $2 million last year," Michael reminded with precision, demonstrating his detailed knowledge about the family's business with that institution. "I'm sure the General Director would be very interested to know how his staff handle medical emergencies when there's business interest involved," he suggested, with a tone that made clear the implicit threat to future commercial relations. The mention of the significant financial contributions that Michael's company had made to the hospital provoked an immediate and visible reaction from Dr. Robert. The doctor began to show signs of nervousness, looking around as if searching for someone from administration who could help him deal with that delicate situation. Other staff whispered among themselves, recognizing Michael's name and understanding the political and financial implications of the confrontation that was unfolding. Sophia observed everything with a mixture of hope and apprehension, realizing that finally someone was fighting for them with the right weapons to win that battle. Michael felt Eleanor move slightly in his arms, a small sign that she was still fighting for her life, which increased even more his determination to secure the necessary medical care. The hospital's atmosphere began to gradually change, with more senior staff appearing in the lobby to assess the situation and make decisions about how to proceed. Dylan held Sophia's hand, offering silent support while observing how his father's economic power was being used for a noble and just cause. "Mr. Johnson, please give us a moment to consult with administration about the best way to proceed in this situation," Dr. Robert requested in a much more respectful tone, his previous arrogance giving way to diplomatic caution. "Obviously, we want to ensure that all patients receive the best possible care, regardless of their social status," he added unconvincingly, trying to correct the negative impression he had caused. But Michael was not willing to accept half measures or vague promises. When Eleanor's life hung by a thread, he moved even closer to Dr. Robert, his body language conveying an unwavering determination that would not accept any more delays or unnecessary bureaucracy. Sophia felt her heart racing as she watched this demonstration of power and influence being used in her favor, something she had never experienced in her life, marked by social marginalization. Eleanor remained unconscious in Michael's arms, but her breathing seemed to be stabilizing slightly, as if her body was responding to the proximity of professional medical help. The hospital lobby filled with palpable tension, with staff and patients discreetly observing the unfolding of this unusual situation. Michael knew he needed to press even harder to ensure that Eleanor received immediate attention, without further loss of time or resources. His experience in negotiations had taught him that in crucial moments like this, it was necessary to be relentless to achieve the desired objectives. "Dr. Robert, there is no time for consultations or administrative meetings. This lady needs medical attention right now, or I will ensure that this hospital faces the legal and financial consequences of its negligence." Michael delivered with calculated coldness, raising his voice so others could clearly hear his words. "You have exactly 2 minutes to begin treatment, or I will carry this patient myself to a hospital that understands its medical and social obligations," he warned with absolute determination, looking directly into the doctor's eyes. The pressure exerted by Michael finally produced the desired result. Dr. Robert, visibly shaken by the prospect of facing the professional and institutional consequences of continuing to deny care, made a quick gesture to a nurse who was observing the scene from a distance. The professional approached immediately, pushing a stretcher she had rushed to get from somewhere in the hospital. Sophia felt a wave of relief mixed with anxiety upon seeing that Eleanor would finally be treated, but she also felt growing fear about what the doctors might discover about her grandmother's health condition. Michael carefully placed Eleanor on the stretcher, watching as the nurse quickly checked her vital signs with professional and efficient movements. Dylan remained at Sophia's side, both observing with fascination and concern the medical procedures that were beginning to unfold before their eyes. The hospital, which moments before had seemed a hostile and exclusionary environment, was now transformed into a place of hope and possibility of salvation for Eleanor. However, Sophia could perceive in the looks of the staff that the change in attitude had not been motivated by compassion or a sense of medical duty, but rather by the economic and social pressure exerted by Michael. "Nurse, prepare emergency room number 3 immediately, and call Dr. Carvalho to evaluate this patient," Dr. Robert ordered with forced efficiency, trying to demonstrate professionalism. "Mr. Johnson, we guarantee that your acquaintance will receive all necessary medical care from now on," he assured with a tone that mixed respect and nervousness. As Eleanor was quickly transported to the emergency room, Sophia tried to follow the stretcher, but was gently prevented by a nurse who explained that only direct family members could enter the treatment area during initial procedures. The girl felt lost and helpless, watching her grandmother disappear through the double doors that led to the interior of the hospital, a place that seemed like another world to someone accustomed to life on the streets. Michael noticed Sophia's helplessness and placed a protective hand on her shoulder, conveying security and support in that moment of extreme anguish. Dylan approached Sophia, offering his presence as a form of consolation, even without knowing exactly what to say in that delicate situation. The three remained in the hospital lobby, awaiting news about Eleanor, while observing the constant movement of doctors, nurses, and other patients. Sophia felt a confused mixture of gratitude for Michael, fear for Eleanor's condition, and shame for being in that luxurious environment with her dirty clothes and shabby appearance. Time seemed to pass in slow motion as they waited for information about the diagnosis and treatment that Eleanor was receiving in the inner corridors of the hospital. "Sophia, your grandmother is in the best possible hands now. The doctors here are very competent and have modern equipment," Michael reassured, trying to calm the girl's visible anxiety. "You were very brave to take care of her alone for so long. Now let the professionals take on that responsibility," he added with fatherly affection, recognizing the forced maturity that Sophia had developed. However, as minutes turned into hours, Sophia began to notice subtle but significant changes in the treatment she received from hospital staff. Some looked at her with disguised curiosity, whispering comments about her appearance, and obviously speculating about her relationship with Michael. Others showed poorly disguised contempt, wrinkling their noses when she passed by, or making ironic comments about charity that they thought she couldn't hear. Sophia felt increasingly uncomfortable in that environment, where her presence seemed to cause embarrassment and irritation in some people. She began to instinctively hide behind Michael, using him as a protective shield against judgmental looks and cruel comments that occasionally reached her ears. Michael noticed Sophia's growing discomfort and was outraged by the lack of professionalism and humanity shown by some hospital staff. Dylan also noticed how people looked at Sophia differently, beginning to understand in practice how social prejudice manifested in everyday situations. "Why are these people looking at me like this? I didn't do anything wrong," Sophia murmured to Michael, trembling slightly from nervousness and embarrassment. "I just want my grandmother to be okay. Why can't they understand that?" she asked with innocence, not fully comprehending the cruelty of social prejudice. Michael felt growing anger at the way Sophia was being treated by hospital staff, people who should demonstrate compassion and professionalism regardless of patients' social status. He positioned himself more protectively beside Sophia, making it clear through his body language that any disrespect directed at her would be considered a personal insult. Dylan observed everything with a thoughtful expression, processing the lessons about social inequality he was learning on that memorable day of his privileged life. After some hours of tense waiting, signs of movement finally appeared in the medical area, with nurses leaving and entering treatment rooms with more frequency and urgency. Sophia rose from the bench where she was sitting, her heart racing with anxiety and expectation about the news she was about to receive. Michael and Dylan also prepared themselves to hear the diagnosis and prognosis about Eleanor's health condition. The hospital lobby, which had been a stage for discrimination and conflict, was now transforming into the setting where Eleanor's fate would be revealed, determining if all the efforts and struggles of that day had been worthwhile. "I hope Grandma has responded well to the treatment. She's stronger than she looks," Sophia commented with forced hope, trying to maintain optimism. "Michael was so kind to help us. I need to find a way to thank him for everything he did," she thought with gratitude, even amid her concern. After several hours of intensive medical procedures, Dr. Robert finally emerged from the double doors that separated the treatment area from the public lobby of the hospital. His facial expression was grave and concerned, with evident signs of fatigue, indicating that he and his team had faced a complex and challenging medical situation. Sophia stood up immediately upon seeing him appear, quickly followed by Michael and Dylan, who also prepared to receive information about Eleanor. The doctor walked slowly toward the group, his hands still covered by surgical gloves, and his coat showing small stains that suggested intensive medical procedures. Sophia could feel her heart beating so hard that it seemed everyone in the hospital could hear the sound, as she tried to decipher Dr. Robert's expression to anticipate the news he was about to share. Michael placed a protective hand on Sophia's shoulder, preparing to provide emotional support, regardless of what the information about Eleanor might be. The silence in the lobby became almost palpable, as everyone awaited the words that could mean hope or tragedy for Sophia. "We did everything within our power, but," Dr. Robert began, shaking his head negatively while looking directly at Sophia. "This situation is much more serious than we initially thought. Your grandmother," he continued with hesitation, leaving the sentence hanging in the air. Dr. Robert's incomplete words hit Sophia like a devastating blow, causing her to collapse in tears, even before he finished explaining Eleanor's medical situation. She immediately understood the implicit meaning in those hesitant words and the doctor's grave expression, interpreting them as confirmation of her worst fears about her grandmother's health condition. Michael quickly knelt beside Sophia, wrapping her in a protective embrace as she sobbed desperately, believing she had lost the only family she had left in the world. Dylan watched the scene with tears in his eyes, moved by the profound pain that Sophia was demonstrating in that moment of apparent tragedy. The hospital lobby filled with respectful silence, with other patients and staff discreetly observing the emotional scene unfolding before their eyes. Sophia felt that her world had completely fallen apart, that all efforts of that day had been in vain, and that now she was completely alone in the world, without Eleanor to care for her and protect her from the cruelties of life on the streets. "No, Grandma can't be dead. She promised she wouldn't leave me alone," Sophia cried desperately, her sobs echoing through the hospital lobby. "I should have come back sooner. I should have taken better care of her," she lamented, carrying the weight of guilt on her small, fragile shoulders. The heavy silence that followed Dr. Robert's incomplete words was broken when he took a deep breath and continued his explanation, completely contradicting the devastating expectations his initial words had created. Sophia raised her tear-swollen eyes, trembling as she prepared to hear the confirmation of her worst fears. But what came next completely changed the course of her desperate thoughts. The doctor moved closer to the group, his expression still grave but carrying a different nuance that Sophia couldn't fully interpret in her fragile emotional state. Michael kept his protective arms around Sophia, prepared to offer all necessary support, regardless of the news they were about to receive. Dylan watched anxiously, his young eyes reflecting the tension that dominated that crucial moment. Dr. Robert looked directly at Sophia before continuing, as if wanting to ensure she was prepared to properly process the complex information he was about to share about Eleanor's health condition. "Your grandmother is alive, Sophia. We managed to stabilize her vital signs and control the infection that was severely compromising her respiratory system," Dr. Robert revealed, observing the instant relief that took over the girl's face. "However, she entered a deep coma during the procedure and the prognosis is very reserved. We estimate she has only a few hours to live," he added with regret, preparing Sophia for the still difficult reality they would face. The doctor's words created a devastating emotional roller coaster in Sophia's heart, which went from absolute despair to momentary relief, only to plunge again into deep anguish as she understood that Eleanor was still in mortal danger. She clung to Michael with renewed strength, her small hands trembling as she tried to process the complexity of the medical situation that the doctor had explained. Michael felt Sophia's body struggle between hope and despair and searched for the right words to offer consolation and strength in that moment of extreme uncertainty. The hospital lobby seemed to have stopped in time, with other patients and staff discreetly observing the emotional scene unfolding before their eyes. Dylan moved closer to Sophia, offering his presence as a source of silent support, as she struggled to understand that her grandmother was technically alive, but still at imminent risk of death. Dr. Robert waited patiently for Sophia to process the information before continuing with more details about the limited options they had ahead. "So she can still recover? Is there any chance she'll wake up and be okay?" Sophia asked with a trembling voice, clinging to any possible hope. "Please, doctor, tell me there's something we can do to save her completely," she pleaded with renewed tears, refusing to accept that Eleanor could be gone forever. Dr. Robert hesitated for a moment before answering Sophia's desperate questions, clearly struggling with the responsibility of being honest about the grim prognosis without completely destroying the girl's hope. He knelt in front of Sophia to be at her eye level, a gesture that demonstrated both compassion and the seriousness of the conversation he was about to have. Michael watched the interaction between the doctor and Sophia carefully, prepared to intervene if he felt the information was being communicated inappropriately for an 8-year-old child. The environment around them seemed to grow quieter and more respectful, as if even the hospital sounds were adjusting to the gravity of the moment being experienced. Dylan discreetly held Sophia's hand, offering physical support as she faced information that no child should have to process alone. The hospital's fluorescent light cast soft shadows on Dr. Robert's face as he carefully chose the words he would use to explain Eleanor's complex situation to a girl who had already faced too many traumas in her young life. "Sophia, your grandmother is fighting bravely, but the coma is very deep and her condition is extremely delicate," the doctor explained gently, trying to balance honesty with sensitivity. "The next moments are crucial, and it would be important for you to stay close to her so you can feel each other's presence, he suggested kindly, preparing Sophia for the possibility of a farewell. The doctor's words resonated in Sophia's heart like a painful echo, confirming her deepest fears about the severity of Eleanor's situation. She nodded slowly, understanding that these might be the last hours she could spend with the grandmother, who had been her only family and protection during the most difficult years of her life. Michael noticed the resigned acceptance that was beginning to take hold of Sophia and decided that he needed to do something meaningful to make those final moments special and memorable for both of them. His business mind, accustomed to solving complex problems quickly, began to work on an idea that could bring some consolation and beauty to that tragic situation. Dylan observed Sophia's face, seeing how she was trying to be brave in the face of a situation that was far beyond her emotional capacity to face alone. Dr. Robert stood up and gestured toward the hospital's inner corridors, indicating that he was ready to take Sophia to the room where Eleanor was hospitalized. The smooth movement of people around them created an almost ceremonial atmosphere, as if everyone understood they were witnessing precious and irreversible moments. "Doctor, before we see Eleanor, I would like to make a special request that may seem unusual," said Michael, placing his hand protectively on Sophia's shoulder. "This girl promised flowers for her grandmother today, and I believe it would be important to fulfill that promise before it's too late," he explained with emotion, remembering the touching simplicity of Sophia's original request. The mention of the promised flowers hit Sophia like a wave of contradictory emotions, bringing back all the painful memories of the day that had begun with so much hope and transformed into a journey of humiliations and tragedies. She vividly remembered Eleanor's joy upon learning it would be her birthday, the solemn promise she had made to get fresh flowers, and all the frustrations and disappointments she had faced during her fruitless search through the city streets. Michael's request awakened in her a deep and renewed gratitude, realizing that someone had remembered and valued something that was so important to her and Eleanor. Dr. Robert observed the interaction with growing curiosity, beginning to understand that there was a much more complex and touching story behind that unlikely group that had arrived at the hospital. Dylan smiled for the first time since they had arrived at the hospital, recognizing his father's kindness and sensitivity in such a delicate moment. The hospital lobby, which had been the stage for conflicts and discrimination, was now transforming into the setting for a gesture of love and compassion that transcended all social and bureaucratic barriers. "Mr. Michael, would you really do that? Bring flowers for Grandma to the hospital?" Sophia asked with a choked voice, barely able to believe that someone would care so much about such a simple request. "It would be the most beautiful present she could receive on the last day of her 63rd birthday," she whispered emotionally, feeling tears of gratitude mixed with sadness. Michael wasted no time in turning his words into concrete action. He pulled out his cell phone and quickly dialed his personal assistant's number, an efficient woman who was accustomed to handling urgent and unusual requests on behalf of the company. While waiting for the call to be answered, he observed Sophia with a growing determination to make those final moments with Eleanor special and memorable. Dylan listened attentively to his father's phone conversation, impressed by the speed and efficiency with which he managed to mobilize resources to help people he had met just a few hours before. Dr. Robert waited patiently, clearly impressed by the demonstration of generosity and humanity he was witnessing in that often cold and impersonal hospital environment. Sophia watched Michael talking on the phone, her eyes shining with a mixture of hope and disbelief at the possibility of finally being able to fulfill the promise she had made to Eleanor early that morning. The constant movement of people in the hospital continued around them, but that small group had created a bubble of intimacy and purpose amid the institutional chaos. "Samantha, I need you to mobilize all the flower shops in the city and buy the most beautiful arrangements you can find. I want daisies, roses, lilies, everything that's available," Michael instructed urgently, gesturing as he spoke. "It's for a very special situation, and I need it delivered to St. Luke's Hospital in no more than 45 minutes. Cost is no object," he emphasized with authority, making it clear that this request had absolute priority. While Michael organized the purchase and delivery of the flowers, Sophia felt a growing emotion taking over her wounded heart. For the first time since she had woken up that morning, she felt that perhaps she could fulfill the promise she had made to Eleanor, even if it was under the most tragic circumstances possible. Dr. Robert suggested that while they waited for the flowers to arrive, they could go to Eleanor's room so Sophia could be close to her grandmother during those crucial moments. The group walked slowly through the hospital corridors, passing rooms where other families faced their own medical and emotional crises. Dylan observed everything with respectful curiosity, never having been so close to the reality of illness and death that were part of the human experience. Michael kept a protective hand on Sophia's shoulder, conveying security and support as she prepared to see Eleanor in critical condition. The hospital corridors seemed to extend infinitely, each step bringing them closer to an encounter that could be a final farewell between grandmother and granddaughter. "Sophia, I want you to know that regardless of what happens, you fulfilled your promise to your grandmother," Michael said affectionately, trying to alleviate any guilt she might be feeling. "Eleanor would be proud to know how determined and brave you were today, trying to get flowers for her," he added with genuine admiration for the girl's strength of character. The room where Eleanor was hospitalized was small, but equipped with all the medical devices necessary to monitor her vital signs and maintain her bodily functions stable. Sophia hesitated at the door for a moment, frightened by all the tubes and machines that were connected to her grandmother's fragile body. Eleanor looked even smaller and more fragile lying in the hospital bed, her pale face contrasting with the white sheets that covered her. The rhythmic sounds of the cardiac monitors created a melancholic soundtrack that filled the silence of the room. Michael and Dylan remained respectfully near the door, giving Sophia space to approach Eleanor without feeling observed. Dr. Robert quickly checked the devices and whispered some instructions to a nurse who was adjusting the intravenous medications. The soft light in the room created an almost sacred atmosphere, as if that small space had been transformed into a sanctuary where life and death met in delicate balance. Sophia slowly approached the bed, her small hands trembling as she reached for Eleanor's cold hand. "Grandma, it's me, Sophia. I managed to bring help and soon we'll have beautiful flowers here in the room," she whispered close to Eleanor's ear, hoping she could hear her words. "I know you're fighting hard to stay with me. Please don't give up yet," she pleaded with a broken voice, gently squeezing her grandmother's hand. 40 minutes later, a succession of delivery people began to arrive at the hospital, carrying floral arrangements from the most diverse flower shops in the city. Michael had mobilized impressive resources, transforming his economic influence into a tangible demonstration of care and compassion. Eleanor's room quickly transformed into an improvised garden, with flowers of all colors and fragrances, filling the previously sterile space with life and beauty. Sophia watched in wonder as red roses, white daisies, yellow lilies, and other flowers she had never seen up close were carefully arranged around Eleanor's bed. The contrast between the cold medical technology and the natural beauty of the flowers created a unique atmosphere where science and love combined in a desperate attempt to awaken Eleanor from her deep coma. Dylan helped organize the arrangements, impressed with the complete transformation that the flowers had caused in the hospital environment. Dr. Robert observed the scene with surprise and emotion, never having witnessed such an elaborate and touching gesture in his years of medical practice. The fragrance of flowers began to fill the air, creating a sense of spring garden in the midst of the hospital environment. "I've never seen so many beautiful flowers together in one place. Grandma will be so happy when she opens her eyes," Sophia murmured enchantedly, gently touching the petals of a red rose. "I managed to keep my promise, even if it took all day for it to happen," she thought with relief, feeling that she had finally honored her word. With the room transformed into a garden of colors and fragrances, Sophia carefully chose a perfect red rose, with velvety petals and a soft perfume that reminded her of the gardens she used to visit with Eleanor when they still lived in a real house. She approached the bed where her grandmother remained motionless, connected to the machines that kept her vital functions stable, and delicately placed the rose in Eleanor's cold and trembling hands. The contrast between the vibrant beauty of the flower and the paleness of the elderly woman's hands created a touching image that was engraved in the memory of everyone present in the room. Sophia knelt beside the bed, her own small hands gently enveloping Eleanor's hands that held the red rose. The tears that had accumulated in her eyes throughout that difficult day began to silently flow down her cheeks, falling like crystalline drops on the flower that symbolized so much love and dedication. Michael, Dylan, and Dr. Robert observed in respectful silence, understanding that they were witnessing a sacred moment between grandmother and granddaughter. "Grandma, I brought the most beautiful flowers in the city for you, exactly as I promised this morning," Sophia whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I know you can smell them, and know that I managed to keep my word," she added with faith, believing that Eleanor could hear her words even while unconscious. It was in this moment of intense emotional connection that something extraordinary began to happen. Sophia's tears, laden with so much love, gratitude, and hopelessness, fell directly onto the petals of the red rose that was in Eleanor's hands. The drops slid gently across the velvety petals and touched the cold skin of the elderly woman's hands, creating a physical connection between the granddaughter's love and the grandmother's sleeping body. Sophia closed her eyes and, inspired by a deep faith she had inherited from her first responder parents, began to make a moving prayer that spontaneously sprang from her wounded heart. Her words were simple, but loaded with a sincerity and purity that deeply touched everyone present in the room. Michael felt tears spring to his own eyes, moved by the demonstration of faith and love he was witnessing. Dylan watched fascinated, learning about the spiritual strength that could emerge in the most difficult moments of human life. Dr. Robert, accustomed to scientific medical procedures, found himself deeply touched by the spiritual dimension of that unique moment. "Dear God, please take care of my Grandma Eleanor with all the love she deserves," Sophia prayed with childlike sincerity, her hands still enveloping Eleanor's. "If it is your will to take her to heaven, please give her peace and love and strength for me to continue living without her here on earth," she asked with surprising maturity for her 8 years. Sophia's prayer echoed through the silent room, creating an atmosphere of reverence and hope that seemed to suspend time. The girl's words were pronounced with an innocent but profound faith, each syllable carrying an unconditional love that transcended the limitations of medicine and science. Michael remained in respectful silence, recognizing that he was witnessing something sacred that went far beyond his business understanding of the world. Dylan discreetly held his father's hand, moved by the purity of the connection between Sophia and Eleanor that manifested through that spontaneous prayer. Dr. Robert discreetly checked the monitors, noting that Eleanor's vital signs remained stable but critical, with no indications of significant improvement. The scent of flowers seemed to intensify during the prayer, as if nature was responding to the sincerity of Sophia's words. The soft light in the room created an almost celestial environment, where the little girl's crystalline tears shone like small diamonds on the petals of the red rose. She is praying with such faith, even facing the possibility of losing the most important person in her life, Michael thought admiringly, recognizing a spiritual strength that he had rarely encountered. This girl has a special connection with God that goes far beyond her age, Dr. Robert reflected, touched by the sincerity of the prayer. Then, at the exact moment when Sophia finished her prayer and slowly opened her eyes, something completely unexpected and extraordinary happened in the silent room. The medical devices monitoring Eleanor's vital signs began to emit different sounds, first subtle and then increasingly insistent and alarming. The heart monitor, which had maintained a regular but weak rhythm for hours, began to accelerate drastically, creating an erratic pattern that made Dr. Robert move quickly toward the equipment. Sophia felt her heart stop for a moment, fearing that those sounds indicated that Eleanor was getting worse, or even dying before her eyes. Eleanor, who had remained motionless and unconscious for hours, began to slowly move her eyelids as if gradually emerging from a very deep sleep. Her fingers, which held the red rose, delicately contracted around the flower, in a reaction that seemed to respond directly to the touch of Sophia's tears and the words of the prayer she had made moments before. Michael and Dylan moved closer to the bed, witnessing a moment that seemed to defy all medical and scientific explanations they knew. "Grandma? Grandma Eleanor? Can you hear me?" Sophia whispered with a trembling voice, hardly daring to believe what her eyes were seeing. "Please open your eyes and tell me you'll be okay. Please don't leave me alone," she pleaded with tears of hope streaming down her cheeks. But at the exact moment when Eleanor seemed to be miraculously recovering, the medical devices began to emit even more alarming and urgent sounds, creating a cacophony of alerts that filled the room with renewed tension. The heart monitor showed erratic patterns that oscillated between normality and extreme irregularity, confusing even Dr. Robert about what exactly was happening with Eleanor. Suddenly, nurses and other doctors began running through the corridors toward the room, alerted by the central monitoring systems that indicated an ongoing medical emergency. Sophia was quickly moved away from the bed by a nurse, who explained that the doctors needed space to properly evaluate and treat Eleanor. The girl desperately watched through the small window of the room, while a medical team formed around her grandmother's bed, performing procedures that she couldn't fully understand. Michael put his protective arms around Sophia, trying to console her, as they watched the frantic medical movement unfolding before their eyes. Dylan remained beside them, equally confused about whether Eleanor was improving or worsening in the face of intense medical activity. "Prepare for defibrillation. Her signals are very unstable," shouted a nurse, running with medical equipment. "We don't know if she's recovering or going into cardiac arrest. We need to act quickly," responded another doctor, checking the monitors with growing urgency. 3 weeks had passed since that dramatic day at the hospital, and what seemed to be the end of a tragic story had transformed into the beginning of a new chapter full of hope and possibilities. Eleanor had completely recovered from her critical condition, exceeding all medical expectations and leaving Dr. Robert impressed with her miraculous recovery. What doctors initially classified as an irreversible situation gradually transformed into a progressive and stable recovery, allowing Eleanor to be released from the hospital after weeks of intensive care. Sophia accompanied every moment of her grandmother's recovery, sleeping in the chair next to the hospital bed and constantly talking with Eleanor during the periods when she was awake and lucid. Michael had ensured that Eleanor received the best available medical treatment, hiring specialists, and providing cutting-edge medications that significantly accelerated her healing process. Dylan visited the hospital daily with his father, developing a genuine friendship with Sophia as they together monitored the positive evolution of Eleanor's health. The transformation in Sophia and Eleanor's lives had been so dramatic that sometimes they still had difficulty believing it was all real and not just a wonderful dream. Dr. Robert had confessed to Michael that in 40 years of medicine, he had never witnessed such a spectacular recovery as Eleanor's, especially considering the severity of her initial condition. "I never thought I'd see the day when Grandma would be completely healed and smiling again," reflected Sophia, watching Eleanor energetically walking around the hospital room. "Michael was an angel sent by God to change our lives when we needed help the most," she thought with deep gratitude, remembering how everything had begun in the park. On Eleanor's last day in the hospital, Michael arrived with a proposal that would leave Sophia and her grandmother completely surprised and emotional. He had spent those 3 weeks deeply reflecting on the impact Sophia had made on his life and Dylan's life, recognizing that the girl's courage and kindness had transformed his perspective on human values and social responsibility. Michael realized that his successful business life had created a bubble of privilege that isolated him from the harsher realities faced by people like Sophia and Eleanor, and he wanted to use his resources in a more meaningful and transformative way. Dylan had extensively talked with his father about Sophia and Eleanor, expressing his desire to continue the friendship he had developed and to help in some practical way in rebuilding their lives. During these conversations, Michael discovered that Dylan had matured significantly through the experience, demonstrating empathy and social understanding that positively surprised him. Eleanor, although grateful for all the medical help they had received, showed growing concern about how she and Sophia would manage to restart their lives after leaving the hospital, as they no longer had the small shelter in the alley where they used to live. The situation created understandable anxiety for Eleanor, who felt responsible for ensuring a secure future for Sophia, but didn't know how to achieve this with their limited resources. Michael had observed this growing concern and decided it was time to present the solution he had been carefully planning. "Eleanor, Sophia, I would like to talk to you about something very important to me and Dylan," said Michael, sitting in the chair next to the hospital bed. "In the last few weeks, you two have completely changed our perspective on what really matters in life," he explained sincerely, looking alternately at Sophia and Eleanor. Michael took a deep breath before continuing, mentally organizing the words he had rehearsed for days to ensure his proposal would be communicated in the clearest and most respectful way possible. He wanted to avoid any misunderstanding or embarrassment, especially considering the pride and dignity Eleanor had always demonstrated, even in the most difficult circumstances. Sophia observed Michael with growing curiosity, intuiting that something important was about to be revealed, while Eleanor maintained a cautious expression, mentally preparing herself for any kind of news that might affect her and her granddaughter's future. Dylan remained by his father's side, knowing he had actively participated in the conversations that led to that proposal, and hoping that Sophia and Eleanor would accept the opportunity being offered. The hospital room, which had been the stage for so many intense emotions during those 3 weeks, was now becoming the setting where a new phase in all their lives would be defined. Michael knew he needed to be careful in explaining his proposal, ensuring that Sophia and Eleanor understood it was a genuine offer of friendship and mutual support, not charity or pity. He had consulted psychologists specialized in social assistance to understand the best way to approach the situation without hurting the dignity of the people he intended to help. "I would like to offer you both an opportunity to rebuild your lives with dignity and security," continued Michael, carefully choosing each word. "I have a large house that we're not using, and I believe it would be perfect for you to start a new life," he proposed hopefully, observing Sophia and Eleanor's reactions. Michael's proposal created a tense silence in the room, with Sophia and Eleanor exchanging glances, loaded with surprise, gratitude, and a certain apprehension about the implications of that generous offer. Eleanor was the first to break the silence, her voice charged with emotion, but also with genuine concern about accepting something that seemed too big for their possibilities of reciprocation. Sophia felt her heart racing with a mixture of joy and anxiety, as the possibility of having a real home again was a dream she had abandoned long ago, but she also feared it might be something temporary or conditioned to factors she didn't fully understand. Michael observed attentively the expressions of both, prepared to clarify any doubt or concern they might have about his proposal. Dylan discreetly held Sophia's hand, transmitting silent support, while she processed that information that could radically change the course of her life. The room's atmosphere seemed charged with expectation and possibility, as if the future of everyone present was being redefined in that crucial moment. Eleanor, with her wisdom and life experience, knew she needed to ask important questions before making any decision that would affect Sophia's future. She had learned through difficult years that offers that seemed too good to be true usually had hidden conditions or undeclared expectations. "Michael, your generosity is touching, but I need to better understand what you're proposing," Eleanor said with dignity, maintaining her respectful but cautious posture. "We don't want to be a burden to your family or accept charity that we won't be able to adequately repay." She expressed her main concern, demonstrating pride even in gratitude. Michael smiled with understanding and respect at Eleanor's reaction, recognizing the dignity and integrity of character she demonstrated even in a situation of vulnerability. He leaned slightly forward, wanting to convey the seriousness and sincerity of his next words, which he had carefully prepared to address exactly the concerns that Eleanor had expressed. Sophia observed the conversation with intense attention, learning about negotiations and human relationships through that respectful dialogue between the two adults she most admired in her life. Dylan also paid attention to how his father conducted that delicate conversation, admiring the sensitivity and diplomacy that Michael demonstrated when dealing with such personal and significant issues. Michael knew he needed to explain his motivation convincingly, showing that his proposal was based on mutual benefit and genuine friendship, not on pity or social obligation. He wanted to ensure that Eleanor understood that accepting his help would be a favor to him and Dylan, not just to them. During the previous weeks, Michael had talked at length with Dylan about the importance of having Sophia and Eleanor in their lives, and was impressed by the maturity and wisdom his son demonstrated in articulating the emotional and social benefits that this new family dynamic could provide. "Eleanor, please allow me to better explain my motivation and ensure that you understand this is not charity," Michael said with respectful seriousness. "Sophia saved my son's life, and you two have taught us values that money can't buy." He clarified his perspective, emphasizing the reciprocal nature of the relationship. Michael continued his explanation, detailing how Sophia had transformed Dylan's perspective on empathy and social responsibility, and how Eleanor's example of strength and dignity had profoundly impacted his own understanding of courage and human resilience. He explained that the house he was offering had belonged to his deceased mother and had been empty for 2 years, needing people who could take care of it and give it life again. Michael also mentioned that Sophia could attend the same private school as Dylan, where she would receive quality education that would open future opportunities that he believed she deserved for the intelligence and determination she had demonstrated. Additionally, he revealed that he had spoken with his lawyers to structure a formal agreement that would guarantee legal security for Eleanor and Sophia, including provisions for education, health, and a small monthly income that would allow Eleanor to maintain her financial independence. Eleanor listened attentively to each word, evaluating not only the generosity of the proposal, but also the sincerity of Michael's motivations and the long-term implications for Sophia's development. The girl remained in respectful silence, understanding that this was a conversation between adults about her future, but trusting Eleanor's judgment to make the best decision. Dylan watched anxiously, hoping that Sophia could become his schoolmate and continue the friendship they had developed. Besides Eleanor, Your life experience and wisdom would be valuable for Dylan to learn about important values that money doesn't teach," added Michael, showing how Eleanor would also contribute to the family. "I'm not offering charity. I'm proposing a genuine exchange where everyone benefits," he emphasized, wanting to eliminate any embarrassment about accepting help. Michael's detailed explanation gradually dispelled Eleanor's concerns about accepting that extraordinary opportunity. She could perceive the sincerity in his words and the respectful way he approached the situation, always emphasizing the contributions that she and Sophia could make instead of just focusing on the help they would receive. Sophia felt a growing emotion taking over her heart as she understood that this proposal meant not just a home, but also the possibility of attending a quality school and continuing her friendship with Dylan. Eleanor looked deeply into Michael's eyes, searching for any sign of falsehood or hidden motivation, but found only honesty and genuine concern for her granddaughter's well-being. The elderly woman also realized that Michael had structured his proposal in a way that preserved their dignity, presenting it as an opportunity for mutual contribution instead of unilateral assistance. Eleanor remembered the words her parents had taught her about accepting help when offered with sincerity and love, and recognized that this was a unique opportunity that could completely transform Sophia's future. After a few moments of silent reflection, Eleanor made the decision that would completely change the course of their lives and Sophia's future. She observed Sophia's anxious face, seeing in it the hope and dream of a better life, and knew she had no right to deny that brave child the opportunity to have a bright future. "Michael, I accept your proposal with gratitude and the promise that we will do our part to honor the trust you are placing in us," Eleanor responded with dignity and determination. "Sophia deserves all the opportunities you are offering, and I will do everything in my power to contribute positively to your family," she promised sincerely, sealing the agreement with firm words. Eleanor's acceptance triggered a wave of joy and relief that took over the entire room, with Sophia jumping from her chair to hug her grandmother and then Michael, while tears of happiness streamed down her cheeks. Dylan smiled broadly, excited about the prospect of having Sophia as a schoolmate and Eleanor as an additional maternal presence in his life. Michael felt a deep satisfaction seeing the genuine happiness his proposal had provided, confirming that he had made the right decision by offering that opportunity for a fresh start. The next few days were filled with intense preparations for the move, with Michael organizing the necessary documentation for Sophia's school enrollment and ensuring that the house was properly cleaned and furnished to receive its new residents. Eleanor insisted on actively participating in the preparations, wanting to contribute with work and effort to demonstrate that she was not a passive beneficiary, but an active partner in that new family arrangement. The transformation in Sophia and Eleanor's lives was so quick and dramatic that sometimes they needed to pinch themselves to make sure they weren't dreaming about that extraordinary change in circumstances. Michael also organized sessions with specialized psychologists to help Sophia and Eleanor with the transition, ensuring that the change in environment and lifestyle was made in the smoothest and healthiest way possible. Dylan actively participated in the preparations, helping to choose furniture and decoration for Sophia's room, demonstrating a contagious enthusiasm that animated the whole family. "I can't believe that in a few days we will have a real home again," Sophia murmured emotionally, helping Eleanor fold the few clothes they owned. "God really hears our prayers and sends angels disguised as kind people to help us," reflected Eleanor with renewed faith, observing how life had changed dramatically. 6 months after moving to the new house, Sophia and Eleanor's lives had stabilized into a happy and productive routine that surpassed all the dreams they had dared to have during the difficult years on the streets. The house that Michael had offered was spacious and cozy, with a garden in the back, where Eleanor cultivated flowers and vegetables, transforming her love for nature into a practical contribution to the family. Sophia had adapted magnificently to the private school, demonstrating an intelligence and determination that impressed her teachers and classmates, especially in subjects like science and mathematics, where she applied the practical logic she had developed during her years of survival on the streets. Dylan and Sophia had become best friends, studying together and sharing adventures that further strengthened the bonds between the two families. Eleanor, with her health completely restored, had assumed a caring maternal role in Dylan's life, teaching him lessons about values, humility, and gratitude that perfectly complemented the education he received from Michael. The integration between the two families had happened in such a natural and harmonious way that it seemed they had always been part of each other's lives. Michael observed with satisfaction how his decision to help Sophia and Eleanor had enriched his own life and Dylan's in ways he had never anticipated. Michael's company had also benefited from this experience, as he had implemented social responsibility programs inspired by Sophia and Eleanor's story, creating employment and education opportunities for other families in vulnerable situations. Sophia had excelled so much academically that her teachers were already talking about scholarship possibilities for prestigious universities when the time came. "Sophia, you got the highest score on the science test again." "I'm so proud of you," commented Eleanor, looking at her granddaughter's school report. "Dylan is also improving a lot in Portuguese since you started helping him with homework," observed Michael, recognizing how the friendship had benefited both children. During those 6 months, the routine of the new family had established itself in a harmonious and productive way. Eleanor woke up early every morning to prepare breakfast for Sophia and Dylan, who had developed the habit of studying together before going to school. Michael had adjusted his work schedule to participate more actively in domestic life, discovering the joy of having lunch as a family and following the academic development of the children. Sophia had surprised everyone by demonstrating exceptional talent for mathematics and science, but had also developed a growing interest in literature, inspired by the stories Eleanor told about her youth and the books Dylan shared with her. Eleanor had become the unofficial matriarch of the family, organizing celebrations for birthdays, holidays, and academic achievements that created precious memories for everyone. Dylan had matured significantly under the influence of Sophia and Eleanor, developing a social conscience and empathy that impressed his teachers and schoolmates. The house had transformed into a true home, where laughter and animated conversations filled the spaces that were once empty and silent. Michael had discovered that helping Sophia and Eleanor had not only been an act of generosity, but also a source of personal growth that had made his life more meaningful and complete. Weekends were dedicated to family activities, such as walks in the park where everything had begun, visits to museums and libraries, and afternoons in the garden where Eleanor taught Sophia and Dylan about plants and gardening. "This house finally has the life and joy that my mother always wanted it to have," commented Michael, watching Sophia and Dylan playing in the garden. "Eleanor brought the family warmth that was missing in our lives," he thought with gratitude, recognizing how the presence of the two had transformed his perspective on family. On a sunny spring afternoon, exactly 1 year after that dramatic day when Sophia had promised flowers for Eleanor, the girl decided to recreate that special moment, but now in completely different and happy circumstances. Eleanor was sitting in the backyard garden of the house, tending to her favorite plants and enjoying the soft afternoon sun, when Sophia appeared carrying a bouquet of fresh flowers that she had carefully selected from the garden that Eleanor had cultivated with such care. The flowers were a colorful mixture of roses, daisies, and lilies that Eleanor had planted and cared for during the previous months, representing the complete cycle of transformation that their lives had experienced. Michael and Dylan watched from the kitchen window, recognizing the symbolic importance of that moment that connected the painful past with the happy present. Sophia approached Eleanor with the same careful and affectionate steps she had used in the hospital months before, but now her face radiated joy instead of sadness. The garden was filled with colors and fragrances that created a perfect environment for that moment of celebration and mutual gratitude. Eleanor had chosen each plant in that garden with special care, creating a space that symbolized growth, renewal, and hope. Sophia had actively participated in planting and caring for the flowers, learning about patience, dedication, and the natural cycle of life through that activity she shared with her grandmother. The garden had become the favorite place of the entire family, where they gathered for important conversations, special celebrations, and moments of contemplative tranquility. "Grandma, I brought fresh flowers for you exactly as I promised a year ago," said Sophia, offering the bouquet with a radiant smile. "This time, I was able to fulfill my promise without any difficulty, because now we have our own garden," she added joyfully, hugging Eleanor among the fragrant flowers. Eleanor received the flowers with tears of happiness in her eyes, vividly remembering that difficult day when Sophia had gone out determined to get flowers for her birthday and had faced so many adversities and humiliations. Now, exactly a year later, her granddaughter could pick flowers from the very garden they had planted together, symbolizing how their lives had blossomed magnificently after so many periods of difficulty and uncertainty. Michael and Dylan joined them in the garden, forming a family circle that represented the genuine union that had developed among people who a year before were complete strangers. The afternoon sun created a golden light that bathed the entire garden, illuminating the colorful flowers and smiling faces of a family that had been formed not by blood ties, but by bonds of love, gratitude, and mutual support. Sophia looked around, seeing Eleanor healthy and happy, Dylan laughing beside her, Michael smiling with paternal satisfaction, and felt a deep gratitude for all the trials they had faced and overcome together. That moment represented not only the fulfillment of a simple promise, but the realization of dreams that seemed impossible just a year before. Eleanor held the flowers against her chest, deeply inhaling their sweet perfume, and remembering how she had believed she would die without seeing Sophia grow and become the extraordinary girl she had become. Michael observed the scene with deep satisfaction, knowing he had made the best decision of his life by opening his heart and home to Sophia and Eleanor. Dylan smiled with the genuine joy of a child who had found not just a special friend, but also an extended family that had enriched his life in unimaginable ways. A year ago, I was desperately trying to find flowers for you in the streets, and today I can pick them from our own garden, reflected Sophia, admiring the complete transformation of their lives. We've learned that sometimes the most difficult moments lead us to the most extraordinary blessings we could never imagine, Eleanor wisely concluded, embracing her entire new family under the golden afternoon sun. 5 years had passed since that transformative day in the park, and life had continued to flourish in ways none of them could have imagined on that fateful afternoon. Sophia, now 13, had become one of the best students in her school, excelling especially in mathematics and sciences, but also demonstrating an exceptional talent for writing and literature. Her teachers frequently commented on her emotional maturity and her unique ability to inspire colleagues who faced personal difficulties, a skill she had developed through her own experience of overcoming adversity. Dylan, also 13, had grown alongside Sophia like a true brother, sharing not only studies and games, but also a deep understanding of social justice and community responsibility that had shaped their future plans. Eleanor, now 68, was healthier and more active than she had been in decades, dedicating her time not only to family care, but also to a volunteer project in homeless shelters, where she shared her experience and offered hope to those facing difficulties similar to those she and Sophia had overcome. Michael had significantly expanded the social programs of his company, creating a foundation that offered housing, education, and work opportunities for vulnerable families, directly inspired by the transformative experience he had lived with Sophia and Eleanor. The house that had once been just an empty property transformed into a true home, filled with laughter, lively conversations, academic projects scattered across the kitchen table, and the constant aroma of flowers that Eleanor continued to cultivate with growing care. Dad, Sophia was selected to represent our school in the National Mathematics Olympiad, Dylan announced enthusiastically, running home with the selection results. And she also won first place in the essay contest about stories of overcoming adversity, he added proudly, admiring his best friend's multiple talents. The news of Sophia's academic achievements filled the entire family with pride and emotion, but also served as a powerful reminder of how a single decision of kindness and courage could change the course of an entire life. Michael watched Sophia helping Dylan with his homework and vividly remembered that frightened, dirty girl who had run to save his son in the park, recognizing how she had transformed into a confident, intelligent, and compassionate young woman. Eleanor, while preparing dinner, smiled as she listened to the animated conversations between the two teenagers, remembering the dark days when she feared she would never live to see Sophia grow up and fulfill her dreams. The garden at the back of the house had expanded considerably over the years, transforming into a small urban oasis where Eleanor cultivated not only ornamental flowers, but also organic vegetables that supplied the family table and were shared with neighbors and friends. Sophia had developed a growing interest in gardening, learning from Eleanor about the cycle of life, patience, and the reward of dedicated work, lessons she applied both in her studies and in her personal relationships. The physical transformation of the property mirrored the emotional and spiritual transformation that had occurred in the lives of all members of that unique family, created not by blood ties, but by conscious choices of love, support, and mutual growth. Grandma Eleanor, I want to plant new red roses at the entrance of the house to celebrate my qualification for the Olympiad, Sophia suggested, remembering the special significance those flowers had in her story. Each of our achievements should be celebrated with something beautiful that we can watch grow, just as our own lives have grown. She reflected wisely, symbolically connecting her academic successes with the family garden. During those 5 years, Sophia had developed the habit of writing in a journal about her experiences, creating a detailed record of her journey from the difficult days on the streets to her current life, full of opportunities and family love. Some of her school essays about overcoming adversity and resilience had been published in the local newspaper, inspiring other children facing similar situations and drawing attention from organizations working with vulnerable youth. Michael often read these texts by Sophia with tears in his eyes, impressed by the emotional depth and intellectual maturity she demonstrated in articulating her experiences and reflections. Dylan had been deeply influenced by his friendship with Sophia, developing a passion for social projects that led him to participate in volunteer work in public schools, where he taught mathematics to underprivileged children, applying the knowledge he had acquired studying with Sophia. Eleanor had become a respected figure in the local community, known for her wisdom, generosity, and ability to offer practical advice to families facing financial or social difficulties. The foundation created by Michael had grown exponentially, helping hundreds of families rebuild their lives, and Sophia had expressed interest in studying business administration and law to eventually work on expanding these social programs. The family's story had become an inspiring legend in the community, often told as an example of how simple acts of kindness could create waves of transformation that extended far beyond the people directly involved. "Michael, sometimes I can't believe it all started with Sophia trying to get flowers for me," Eleanor commented, watching the young woman studying intently for the Olympiad. That simple promise of a brave girl changed not only our lives but the lives of hundreds of other families through the foundation. She observed with admiration, recognizing the transformative power of small gestures. On a special spring afternoon, exactly 5 years after that transformative encounter in the park, the family decided to make a symbolic pilgrimage back to the place where it all began. Sophia and Dylan, now tall and confident teenagers, walked along the same trails where once a desperate girl had tried to find flowers for her sick grandmother. Eleanor, radiant with health and wearing a floral dress that Sophia had chosen especially for the occasion, held a bouquet of red roses picked from her own garden. Michael watched with deep satisfaction how that park, which had once been the scene of near tragedy, now transformed into a place of celebration and gratitude. The playground where Dylan had choked was full of children playing happily, their laughter echoing through the afternoon air like a soundtrack of hope and life. Sophia headed to the exact spot where she had performed the life-saving maneuver on Dylan, closing her eyes for a moment to relive that crucial moment that had changed the course of all their lives. The 8-year-old girl who once cried desperately in that same place was now about to represent her school in a national competition, demonstrating how human potential can flourish when nurtured with love, opportunity, and proper support. "This place will always remind me that miracles can happen when we least expect them," said Sophia, gently placing the roses on the bench where Michael had sat on that fateful day. "Every time we pass by here, we'll remember that a single choice to help someone can change the entire world," added Dylan, deeply understanding how his life had been enriched by his friendship with Sophia. As they watched the sunset paint the sky with golden and rosy hues, the 4 members of that unique family silently reflected on the extraordinary journey they had shared. Sophia thought about how her paramedic parents would be proud to see her using the knowledge they had taught her to save a life and, indirectly, transform her own existence. Eleanor felt deep gratitude for having lived to see her granddaughter not only survive adversities, but thrive in ways that surpassed all her most optimistic dreams. Michael reflected on how a simple business call in the park had transformed into the most meaningful experience of his life, teaching him lessons about humanity that no business success had provided. Dylan contemplated how his friendship with Sophia had shaped his understanding of justice, compassion, and social responsibility, influencing his future aspirations to work toward creating a more just and equitable world. The park, bathed in the soft light of dusk, seemed to silently approve of that family reunion, offering a perfect setting for reflection on transformation, growth, and the unexpected beauty that can emerge from the most challenging moments of human life. The red roses left on the bench symbolized not only a promise fulfilled, but also a complete cycle of renewal, hope, and unconditional love that had blossomed from a single moment of courage and kindness. "When I grow up, I want to create a special school for children who live on the streets, where they can discover their talents as I discovered mine," declared Sophia, articulating her future dreams inspired by her own experience. And I will help you achieve that dream, because I've learned that the best projects are those born from real experiences of overcoming, promised Dylan, sealing a pact of friendship and purpose that would last a lifetime. Now tell us in the comments where you're from. If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to continue bringing emotional stories almost every day. Don't miss the next surprising narrative that's about to appear on your screen. We immensely appreciate having you here with us. Now, you can click on the links that are appearing on screen right now. We have a special selection just for you, filled with valuable stories and guaranteed entertainment. See you there.